Businesses and consumers operate and make decisions in very different ways, and while that might seem like a very straightforward point to make, it really does impact the way in which we research B2B versus B2C markets. A good starting point is the decision-making unit themselves. So within a business, the decision-making unit is likely to be broader and much larger than in a consumer context where there may only be one or two decision makers. And what that means is that when we're researching B2B markets, we need to get inside the organisation and then operate horizontally in an attempt to gather insights from each individual that's part of that decision. Secondly, the value of B2B purchases tends to be a lot larger. We tend to have longer term buyers, and there's generally a more relationship-based approach to making these purchases. Part of the reason there is because there is higher accountability. Due to the fact that we have higher value purchases, the decision makers are more accountable for the decisions that they make, which absolutely impacts the way in which they respond to a research study like the ones we would be carrying out. The study that was carried out by B2B International that looked into the cultural biases that exist in B2B research actually revealed similar results to the existing literature that had looked at those biases in consumer circles. For example, respondents in Latin America, the likes of Mexico and Brazil, more likely to provide higher scores on a rating scale than in the likes of East Asia, Japan, Singapore, and also parts of Oceania. In addition, there was an inclination to agree with the interviewer, known as acquiescence bias, in the likes of China versus a lower bias in the likes of Western Europe, markets like France. And those were very similar results in B2B and B2C markets. However, we did find some differences. For example, the extent to which culture affects response styles was less extreme in B2B studies than in consumer studies. And we feel that there are two key factors at play here. First of all, to go back to the decision-making unit, it is broader and usually contains individuals of varying seniorities. We found in our study that the respondent seniority has a big impact on the style of their responses, particularly when looking at rating scales. Another important difference was the fact that many businesses today have a global reach, and therefore you might have multiple cultures affecting decisions and indeed affecting responses to B2B research that are present even within one organisation. You don't find that, or at least don't usually find that, in a consumer context. The globalization of business and the proliferation of business-to-business research means that what were once emerging markets, such as China, for example, are now being pulled towards the centre, and we see that Chinese respondents in business-to-business studies tend to be responding in much more similar ways to more established research-savvy markets like the United States, far more than they were 5 to 7 years ago. Secondly, we've noticed that because of B2B migration of people, in other words, people moving countries to operate within the same or different businesses, means that there is a certain muddying of the waters, which makes it more challenging and more difficult to actually identify cultural biases in B2B studies. This is definitely something worth considering, and one of the reasons why it's extremely difficult to eliminate cultural bias altogether.